Hello, and welcome to Sunday Driver on the Alsatianproductions YouTube channel. My name is Jack Haber, and I am the founder and editor-in-chief of Alsatianproductions. Today is the first episode of Sunday Driver, a casual look at sim racing and other kinds of racing games. Sim racing has boomed in the 25 plus years since I've started playing computer racing games on, PCs, PlayStations. It's become a multi-million-dollar industry full of, many games, many mods, many accessories. That's not really what Sunday Driver is about. Whilst I do take racing very seriously, my first word ever spoken was vroom, after all. The idea of Sunday Driver is simply to give the viewer, you, the option to see different kinds of racing games without feeling like if you pick this up and you're not good at it, well, you're a failure. No, that's not the point of this. The point of this is to have a good time, watch me fail at various types of sim racing, even though in my own mind, I'm the greatest driver ever, and I don't really understand why Zach Brown isn't giving me a call to replace Lando at McLaren, but, that's just me. Anyway, let's get into it. So, what you're looking at is the launcher for the greatest racing sim ever created, the grandfather, pretty much, of all fantastic racing sims. Apologies to Jeff Crammond, your Grand Prix is pretty good. This, however, is better. It's Grand Prix Legends. Created in 1998 by Papyrus Design Group, who have created such titles as iRacing. A different company bought the rights to the Papyrus stuff to create iRacing, but technically it is a Papyrus game. And the NASCAR Racing Series, and published by Sierrasports, known for Leisure Suit Larry. Sierrasports was a very influential game company in the early years of computing. If you've ever seen Hold and Catch Fire, the idea of mutiny is basically based a little bit on Sierrasports. Development by Papyrus started in 1995, and 25 to 30 people worked on the game, led by, I believe, David Kemmer, and they tried to make it as realistic as humanly possible. They took their basis from the great 1966 film Grand Prix, starring James Garner, Yves Montand, Brian Bedford, Antonio Sabato, Francois Hardy, Eva Marie Saint, and Jessica Walter. Yes, the same Jessica Walter who starred in Arrested Development and Archer. As well as many Grand Prix drivers of the year, including Graham Hill, who has a speaking role in the film, as does Jochen Rindt. And Phil Hill served as technical advisor alongside Bob Bondurant. Now, if you know anything about 70s television, James Garner played Jim Rockford, the famous private investigator who could do incredible car stunts in his Pontiac Firebird. Garner learned how to do this stuff because he would go on to become a decent enough amateur racing driver and sponsor a couple professional teams thanks to starring in Grand Prix. Bob Bondurant took all the actors who were supposed to be the drivers around in a modified Formula One car, and Garner was the only one who got out laughing and enjoying himself, and Bondurant said he was such a quick learner that he probably could have driven in any kind of Formula One race he wanted. So, with that background, Papyrus decided, let's build a 60s Formula One racing game. Their driving dynamics model for Grand Prix Legends is probably one of the toughest things about sim racing. I got my copy of Grand Prix Legends for my 8th Christmas. I came down on Christmas morning, I got two things, and I remember them vividly. A model of Jim Clark's Lotus 49 from 1967, and a copy of Grand Prix Legends on PC. And for most of my childhood, from the age of 8 to about the age of 15, I was terrible at Grand Prix Legends. I just liked, driving around, crashing, resetting the car, driving around, crashing, resetting the car, and just seeing what I could do. Just throwing cars into corners. I don't want to say I learned how to drive by using Grand Prix Legends, but in a way I feel like Grand Prix Legends kind of taught me how to balance a car through a corner and keep it steady and level through. So, Grand Prix Legends is based on the 1967 season. The cars and tracks were recreated to the best of their abilities, with only minor discrepancies. David Cameron and his team worked off of blueprints of tracks and photographs, basically, of these tracks to try to recreate them as closely as humanly possible. Some minor discrepancies include things like the Rouen SS pit box being made of found rock instead of a whitewashed, almost stucco-y kind of thing, as would have been realistic. Another one, and I'm going to use the track map of Kyalami here for example, the pit lane had a guardrail. In the real circuit, the pit lane did not have a guardrail. It was just an open pit lane, and there was nothing separating it from the racetrack besides a white and yellow line. But when you're 8 years old, or you've always wanted to see what it's like to drive one of these cars, you don't really care too much. And I think Papyrus did a really good job of recreating this. Another small thing that they couldn't get was the licensing for the Cooper Car Company, makers of both the first successful rear-engined Formula One car to win the World Championship, as well as, of course, the Mini Cooper. They probably couldn't get the rights. I'm not really sure what the deal was, but they couldn't get the rights. And Honda also wouldn't let them use their likeness in Grand Prix Legends. As I stated, the dynamic system was incredibly difficult, especially for novice drivers or sim racers, kind of like myself, who just dropped in casually. You got a strategy guide for the game. It was 100 pages long, and it would describe all the tracks and all the cars, and know what you could do to try and make them a little bit faster. Frankly, I never used them. I just jumped in the car, took off, crashed, reset the car, crashed, went back into car setup, took out fuel, got back in the car, went a little bit faster, crashed, and enjoyed myself immensely. The dynamic system was supposed to be used in NASCAR Racing 3. There is a video about how they had tried the dynamic system in NASCAR Racing 3, but because they had to meet a deadline for it, it didn't come out with that system. It used a modified NASCAR Racing 2 system. But it was used in NASCAR Racing 4 and the famous NASCAR Racing 2003 title, which is another very popular title amongst sim racers. And it has also provided the modified, it's been modified to provide a good dynamic system for iRacing. So if you play iRacing, which maybe some of you do who are watching, and you wonder, boy, these cars feel really realistic to how they should. thank Grand Prix Legends, because without them, it wouldn't be as realistic. GameSpot, which was the video game site I used as a child to get cheat codes, learn about new games, see what people were saying about these games, gave the game an 8.9 out of 10. It stated that the game should have had a better learning curve, and this was actually referenced by simracing, Race Sim Central, for Historic Sim Racing's 1987 IndyCar mod for R Factor, when they stated that the IndyCar mod for R Factor was as difficult to drive as the original Grand Prix Legends. I tested both. I can definitely tell you, yes, they are. If you don't really know what you're doing right out of the gate, you're going to have a bit of a problem. Just stick with it. It's going to be okay. The other thing was that GameSpot said was that the game had a poor frames per second rate. I can attest to this because I had a Windows 98 computer in my basement. I had like 3 games installed on it. One was Image Space is Sports Car GT. The other was NASCAR Racing 3 by Papyrus, which a friend gave me for my 8th birthday, and Grand Prix Legends. And if you ran Grand Prix Legends with the disc in, you might get an hour of play in the game before your computer decided enough was enough and crashed. If you didn't run the disc, you might get 25 minutes. So you'd be out doing a pole lap at Spa, flying down the street. You'd set the car perfectly through the Master Kink. You're heading down to Stavlo. You're going to take on the farthest section. You turn the car just slightly into Stavlo. It's bouncing on the knife edge, and the game crashes. You go back to your home screen, and you have to do it all over again. And you just know that was going to be good enough for pole. You know, but you'll never be able to find out. That was what Grand Prix Legends could do on a Windows 98 computer sometimes. Thankfully, with Windows 10 and 11, we don't have this problem. The game was not popular in the United States. Only a couple thousand copies were sold at launch due to Americans probably not understanding 1, Formula One, and 2, Formula One from 30 years before. But over time it grew and grew, and about 200,000 copies were sold worldwide by about 2004. The modding community took off. The modding community is still strong to this day. And thanks to the modding community, we have many great tools and mods, of course. We have many tracks that we can think of, with a few notable exceptions. And as we do this playthrough, which will be a long-form playthrough on sundaydriver, I'll talk through why, maybe these tracks weren't picked. And some were started and never finished. I've seen pictures of them. But them not being in there doesn't take too much away from the game. My immersion certainly isn't ruined, but it would be nice to have them. But I'm thankful for what I do have in this game. So we have a couple different mods we're going to look at today. The 2 essential mods I would talk about are the 67 extra mod, and the 67 Formula 2 mod, which you'll be able to see. This is the 68 car set for the 67 Formula 2 mod. I've been playing around with it for the past couple of days trying to get this right for this video. These 2 mods I would definitely suggest picking up for your Grand Prix Legends game. They are super fun to play and super enjoyable to do. There are also mods spanning every year of Formula One from 1965 to 1969. They are working on a 1970 mod. It's a rumor, but I believe it's true. Right now they're working, I believe, on a Formula Ford mod, which is a perfect car for this graphics or this driving dynamics engine because Formula Fords are the equivalent to how a chicken is to a raptor. A Formula Ford is as close to one of these Formula One cars as you can get into the modern day. We also have, of course, the 67 Formula 2 mod. You can get the 68 Formula 2 car set to be played in your 67 Formula 2 mod. We also have the 67 and 71 World Sports Car Series. I have the 67s. The 66 and 71 Can-Am mods. They've just come out with a Caterham 7 mod, which once again, thanks to this driving dynamics engine, that's the perfect car for this, and if you like driving sports cars, this would be a perfect mod for you, as well as many tracks. Many of the tracks have been updated to reflect the real world circuits of the era. You got 11 tracks in the original Grand Prix Legends, stretching from Kyalami in South Africa to Mexico City, with Watkins Glen, Monza, the original Nürburgring, the original Spa, the Monaco Grand Prix, and the British Grand Prix at Silverstone being just some of them. They went with the famous Rouen des Essarts track in Normandy, France for the French Grand Prix in the game because in 1967 the French Grand Prix was held at Le Mans, but not the big 24-hour track, the little track they built in the infield that kind of went through the parking areas. It was a boring track, nobody really liked it, and frankly, Rouen would have been the better choice anyway, so thank you, Papyrus. It's one of my favorite tracks in the game to play. There are also new interfaces for the game. So, one of them is for the online servers. Grand Prix Legends was one of the first games to have a massive online community of online racing, and it was run through something I believe was called the One Network, WON, and it was like through your dial-up, like your 56K modem. Of course, those servers no longer exist, but many of the community members have built a specific online server system for you to be able to play online against anyone in the world who enjoys this game. The other interface is Gem. This is how you run all your mods in Grand Prix Legends. Vanilla Grand Prix Legends is great. You know, in Vanilla Grand Prix Legends, you're gonna have a good time. You're gonna have a good time, but at some point you're going to always want more. I definitely did as a child. You are definitely going to want more. Gem is how you work with it. So let me walk you through all this. So, this is it. The top left-hand corner has your install section. That's where your GPL files are coming from. Then you have your car sets. So these are all my car sets for this. As you can see, we have Grand Prix Legend, we have the 67 Formula 2 mod, the 68 Formula 2 car set, the 67 sports car mod, the 1967 FV, which I think is a fan-made mod of the Volkswagen-powered Formula V series. They're just the F1 cars with the hot slower engines, so I'm going to remove that. We have the 1968 and 67 Tasman series from Australia car sets. We'll get into them in the Long Play series. You need vanilla Grand Prix Legends to be able to run them. We also have 1965 Formula 2, technically, series. That is for a later thing in the Long Play series. I'm kind of playing around with trying to get that to work properly, but we're getting there. We're getting there. There is the 69 Extra mod, which is really important. It has every car and driver that would have raced in the 1969 Formula One World Championship, from Graham Hill and Jochen Rindt Lotus 49, sponsored by Gold Leaf, to the crazy stained glass windowed Eagle Climax of Canadian driver Al Peace. The only driver in Formula One history was ever disqualified from a Grand Prix for driving too slowly. But we'll get into that shortly. So, this is my 65 Formula 2 set. We'll worry about that in a little while. That's for the long play series. Then we go over to configuration. So, you'll want to click this one, Link Car Set to Player, and Link AI Speed to Player. These are really important to have for this, to keep everything running smoothly. And I'll explain why you want to click Link AI Speed to Player. There's other sort of things that I don't play around with, they're just there. So, then you pick your circuit. I have 6 installed. I have many more to play with, but I have 6 installed because sometimes the tracks don't show up. Sometimes they run a bit slow, sometimes they don't want to load at all, so I just have 6 to make everything about the game happy. You can build your own season for the World Championship if you want, that's always an option. Here's how you can pick your car. We're going to pick a Formula 2 car for this video, and I'm going to talk you through why when we get into the video. Standard chassis, that's the standard Formula 2 car. In Formula 1 terms, it would be the full Grand Prix car. The advanced trainer is technically what the Formula 2 car is. If you click that when you're playing in training mode and you're running a Formula 1 car and you want advanced trainer, it gives you all the power of a 1600cc Formula 2 car. They're a lot of fun to play with. They have more grip than power. They have all the same grip as an F1 car with half the power. Fantastic cars to play with, always enjoyable. And then you have the basic trainers, which are based on 1-liter Formula 3 cars that ran from 1964 to 1970, called Screamers. If you go on YouTube, there was a great race this year from the Goodwood members meeting in 2026 of 1-liter Formula 3 cars, and it is fearsome and intense for what's basically an exhibition race. In terms, I mean, you want to win at Goodwood, so you're going to go for it, but technically it's considered to be an exhibition. Here are your graphics options. Play around with these. I found Direct 3D works the best for that. Controls, you can't really change any of the controls here. Just a couple things here and there. We're not going to be playing with a force feedback wheel. We're not going to be playing with a wheel at all. When I was a kid, I had a wheel for Grand Prix Legends and a wheel for NASCAR Racing 3. It wound up developing enough play, it just didn't feel proper in it anymore. When I upgraded computers a couple years ago, I downloaded Grand Prix Legends, and I bought the exact same wheel I had when I was a kid. I didn't like it. I just found the USB controller, plugged it into my computer, set the buttons, and now I just race like I'm playing on a PlayStation. There are a couple different modes. There's testing, training in the game, single race, self-explanatory, multiplayer, the online multiplayer. You won't use the online multiplayer in the game. You'll use Igor to get that set up. That's the online system, and the World Championship mode. But we're going to start with training, and here's how you pick the car sets for all this. So, the 67 Extra mod has 7 different car sets for all the races that took place in 1967. These are the car sets we have. There were 17 Formula One races in 1967. 11 of them counted for the World Championship, and including 8 Tasman Series races that were run for 2.5-liter cars. There are 25 Formula One races. The 1967 F1 set also includes the cars for the 68 South African Grand Prix, because in the 60s, the South African Grand Prix was held basically on New Year's weekend, and nobody ever had a new car technically ready to go. So year-old cars would show up, and even from the top teams, and that's what we have for that series or that race is the cars from the 1967 series. So we're going to stick with the 1967 Part 1 for this. So here's how you can pick your setups. This is my setup for this. And then there's a couple different damage sets for training in the game. So there's no damage. Perfect for the people who just get Grand Prix Legends for the first time. Novice damage. Your tires may fail. Your engine may blow. It's highly unlikely. Your suspension could be a little bit off, meaning the wheel alignment's a little bit off, but it's highly unlikely. Advanced is you can lose wheels, you can blow engines if you over rev it too hard. You can have punctures. It's a common thing to occur, but you can reset as you can with Novice by hitting Shift plus R, or Shift R technically, and the car will reset when the track is clear, or your car has finally stopped rolling down the track, either on its wheels or on your head. Realistic damage, it's what it says on the tin. You hit something, you get a puncture, you run over too many curbs, your tire goes flat, your suspension breaks. Well, too bad, Chief. You're done for the day. So I'm going to run it with advanced damage. And I am going to come back in a moment when I click this GPL button, because I have to reset the capture for Grand Prix Legends. And we're going to go into that in just a moment. Hang tight. Alright, so we're in Grand Prix Legends, the 67 extra mod. In vanilla Grand Prix Legends, it would be 1966 World Champion Jack Brabham and his wonderful Brabham BT20 Repco in a nice little slide. I believe at Kyami. Instead, we get the greatest driver of the 1960s, probably the greatest driver of all time, Scottish border farmer Jim Clark, and his wonderful Lotus 49 at the 1967 British Grand Prix, which he won. One of 4 races he took in 1967, including the 1967 Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort, which was the inaugural victory for both the Lotus 49 and the Ford Cosworth DFV engine on debut. The Cosworth DFV would go on to win 155 Grand Prix and is one of the most successful Formula One engines of all time. Clark won a total of 25 World Championship Grand Prix between the Belgian Grand Prix of 1962 at Spa and the 1968 South African Grand Prix at Kyalami, beating Juan Manuel Fange's previous record. Unfortunately, a few months after his Kyalami victory, he was killed in a Formula 2 race at Hockenheim. Not a minor league Formula 2 race, mind you, as most people say, because the Formula 2 races of the era were not like where Kimi Antonelli and, Santino Ferrucci and Colin Herta are busy battling it out and running into each other. Formula 2 races were like mini Formula 1 events, kind of like what Busch racing was in the 2000s, where Saturday's Busch race was technically Cup, just in different colored cars. The drivers couldn't compete for points, and we'll get into the F2 series in a little while. Definitely in this long play series. I enjoy Formula 2. We're going to be playing Formula 2. So let me run you through the main screen here. So this is the player screen for me, Jack 67X Extra Extra Coburn. And we're looking at Formula 2 cars. I'm going to pick the Lotus 48. This car right here, which is not technically a miniature Lotus 49, it's more based on the 35 Formula 2 car of the previous era. It's powered by a 1600cc Cosworth FVA, basically half the DFV. When Ford put the money together for the DFV program in 1966, they also wanted a smaller version of the engine produced. Cosworth produced the FVA, which stands for 4-valve A. There was also a 4-valve B. I can't remember what the total differences are, but the FVA is a little bit tighter wound than the DFV. I believe they were used in RS escorts in rally racing, and they were not too flexible. Roger Clark, I think, blew 3 while practicing and running in the 1969 Coupe des Alpes. But the FVA was a really good engine in Formula 2. It was replaced by the 1600 to 1800 to 2 liter BBA, belt-driven A motor, which was also found in later versions of the Mark I RS Escort and the Mark II RS Escort, and of course led Roger Clark onto many victories in rally racing. So anyway, this is how you can pick your car. So we have Bravo, and you can pick different cars for the different events. Because this is a complete mod for Grand Prix Legends. Then we go to some privateers who drove Brahms. This is Bob Anderson, one of the last great Formula 1 privateers of all time. He did it by himself with a couple mechanics and traveled as far afield as South Africa. He was actually pretty decent at Monaco. He scored a couple points, I believe. He definitely scored points in a lot of races. 1967 saw him use, I believe, a 2-liter Climax engine in the back of his Brabham instead of a 1.5 liter. The car was starting to get pretty ancient. He was thinking about putting the parts into a bespoke chassis that he was going to build himself. But unfortunately never got the chance to. Tragically, was killed practicing for the Canadian Grand Prix, well, testing for the Canadian Grand Prix at Silverstone. He skidded off the road on a wet day, hit a marshal's post, and because he wasn't wearing seat belts, he plowed straight into the steering wheel, broke some ribs, and basically died because they punctured his lung. The chairman of BRM came out later on and said they would have liked to have him for the 68 season, but of course it was a little too late. But he's one of the all-time Formula 1 heroes of mine of the 1960s because he did it for fun. And I think that's the most important thing about Formula 1 in the 60s was it was still fun. It was just, people going around the world racing cars, putting themselves obviously in danger. These cars were not safe, really, compared to the Formula 1 cars of today. But they just did it. 1967 was the last year before sponsorships came on the sides of cars and Formula 1 began to become a business. Thank you so much, Bernie Ecclestone, for that. But 1967, as Nigel Roebuck the famous Formula One columnist for both Autosport and Motorsport magazines once said about it, it was the last simple year. I tend to agree. And yeah. Then we have British Racing Motors, BRM. If you've ever seen Grand Prix, you might remember this as the car Scott Stoddart drove, pretending to be Jackie Stewart. Brian Bedford played that role to perfection. I just have to state that. These are all the cars. They're powered by the diabolically complicated and heavy BRM H16 engine, basically two 8-valve, 1.5 liter engines, basically put side by side in the BRM chassis. It was heavy, it was complicated, it didn't work for BRM, and despite Stewart scoring a second at Spa in '67, it was a pretty rough year for all involved. Reg Parnell Racing was a privateer team that ran last year's BRM. Reg Parnell was someone who worked with BRM in the 1950s. He founded his own team after he retired from driving in the late 1950s, ran BRMs, Lotus BRMs, that sort of thing. He unfortunately perished from an appendix infection in 1964. His son Tim took over running the team, and multiple drivers ran for him, including Piers Courage, I believe Chris Irwin. Pedro Rodriguez ran for them for a very short time, and of course, famous Formula One driver and commentator David Hobbs. So Reg Parnell Racing is just a privateer outfit. Then you have the men who turned rear-engine Formula One cars into a successful enterprise, the Cooper Car Company. These are the cars you see. We'll see. This is Pedro Rodriguez. He won the 1967 Grand Prix for Cooper. It was the last victory for Cooper, almost 10 years since Sterling Moss had won the opening race of 1958 in Argentina, setting off the rear-engine revolution in Formula One. These people are also responsible for the rear-engine revolution at Indianapolis. Team Lotus just took it a little bit further by winning the thing. Cooper Car Company, of course, have created the Mini Cooper and are now owned by BMW to produce the Mini Cooper. John Love could have won the 1967 South African Grand Prix if he didn't have to stop to get fuel in his 2.5 liter Cooper T79 utilizing a Tasman Series Climax block. John Love was a British touring car champion for Mini in the early 1960s, and he was a multiple South African Formula One champion. Yes, they had a national series in South Africa for Formula One cars. It was very popular, and John Love and Sam Tingle were two of the top drivers in this era alongside Jackie Pretorius and Dave Charlton. So, John Love, you get to run his car if you want. Anglo-American racers, or All-American racers as they would become known, were created by driving genius and mechanical genius Dan Gurney. 6'4" tall Dan Gurney designed his own Formula One cars called the Eagle. And in 1966, they were powered by Climax engines. In 1967, they were powered by a Westlake V12. Harry Westlake in England built his own V12, gave it to Dan Gurney to run. He took a memorable victory in the 1967 Belgian Grand Prix. It is the only time an American car has ever won a Formula One World Championship race. So, that's a very popular and beautiful looking Eagle T1J. Here is the Eagle T1F powered by a Climax engine. He raced this in the 1967 South African Grand Prix. So you have that as an option as well. Ferrari. Ferrari did not compete in the 1967 South African Grand Prix. Ferrari didn't really show up to all the Grand Prix as they have to today. Formula One was a very different sport back then. You didn't have to show up to anything if you didn't want to. And Ferrari was not actually highly successful at this time, especially in 1967. If John Surtees didn't get fired or didn't quit actually after winning the 66 Belgian Grand Prix for Ferrari and stuck around for 1967, maybe it was a different story. If Lorenzo Bandini wasn't tragically killed at Monaco, it might have been a different story. But this man, Chris Amon, who is widely considered to be the unluckiest man of the 1960s Formula One series, 96 Grand Prix was in the lead multiple times in multiple races, and something would always happen and he'd lose. He was actually one of the luckiest because he was one of the few that survived the era. But Ferrari was not successful in 1967. They took an international trophy victory at Silverstone in a non-championship race thanks to Mike Parks. Lorenzo Bandini finished second to Dan Gurney at the Brands Hatch Race Champions non-championship race. Mike Parks was badly injured in the Belgian Grand Prix, however, Ludovico Scarfiati realized he probably wasn't going to survive when he stayed with Ferrari and he moved to Eagle, leaving Chris Amon as the lone Ferrari Formula One driver for most of 1967. The Ferrari 312 sounds fantastic, but it isn't. It's a very heavy car to drive. If you can see on the back here, the pipes, the joke was that it was called Stepstoe and Son, which is the original British version of what would become Sanford and Son here in the United States. They were junk men. It looks like they were having junk pipes on the back of this Ferrari, hence Steptoe and Son. But that's Ferrari for you. Then we go to the privateers for South Africa, which are Sam Tingle and his Brabham BT11B. Sam Tingle, of course, one of the good South African drivers of the decade, raced in the National Championship, and also competed in the World Championship South African Grand Prix, and Doug Serurier, I guess that's how you pronounce his name, driving the LDS MK3, which is a Brabham clone he built in his own house. There were a couple different LDSs he ran. I think this has a Climax engine in the back of it. Later on, they would have the same Repco engines as the Brabhams did. They only ever started South African Grand Prix, and they weren't too successful. Anyway, now we get onto my team, Team Lotus, the team of Jim Karp and Graham Hill, and, of course, Jack Cover. We're looking at the Lotus 43, which, if you look at it, you're going, Jack, that's a Lotus 49 with a bunch of pipes up the back. Technically, you're right, and technically you're wrong. The 43 did provide some inspiration for the steroidal look of the 49, but the 43 was based around an IndyCar design, because Lotus actually wanted to use the BRM-H16 in the back of their IndyCar for their 1966 Indy 500, but some people broke into British Racing Motors and damaged the H16 engines, and they weren't able to be used in the Indy 500. But Team Lotus took delivery of them at the 66 Italian Grand Prix, because I don't think Peter Rundell used the car in any other Grand Prix before the 66 Italian Grand Prix. Karp definitely drove the 43 in the 66 Italian Grand Prix. It broke. but he took the only victory for the complicated age 16 at the 1966 United States Grand Prix at Watkins Glen. And basically, if Lorenzo Bandini didn't retire, he would have probably not won that race. But the Lotus 43, it only got used in one race in 1967, the South African Grand Prix. So there's that. Here we go. Here is one of the cars we will be racing today. This is the Lotus 33 powered by a 2-liter Tasman version of the BRM V8. The 33A that you see here was used by Jim Clark and Graham Hill in the 1967 Monaco Grand Prix. I believe Clark's is actually covered through Climax powered, and Graham Hill's was BRM powered. Graham Hill also used it in the Silverstone International Trophy. That's what SIT stands for. And the 33 was a evolution of the Lotus 25, which Jim Clark used to win the 1963 world title. The 25 is notable because it's the first car to use monocoque construction in Formula One, hence why it is one of the most famous Lotuses of all time. 33 is slightly overlooked, but Clark took it to the 1965 world title. He missed out on winning the one race that he would never win in his career, the 1965 Monaco Grand Prix. If he had not gone to Indianapolis and won the 500 there, he probably would have raced in Monaco, probably would have been a challenge for Graham Hill, might have won the Monaco Grand Prix with that car, because he was absolutely unstoppable in 1965. The car continued on into 1966 with the start of the 3-liter formula using this 2-liter BRM, and Clark's magic was able to keep it pretty competitive. Once they switched over to the 49 at the Dutch Grand Prix, the Tim Purnell racing team used it in the BRM type colors of the 33B. Tim Purnell Racing, of course, is offshoot is basically Reg Purnell Racing, and they had always been Lotus customers putting BRM engines in the back of them. They had had 33s since 1964. This 33B that you see here is actually Clark's 1963 Lotus 25 evolved into a Lotus 33. It would later on go down to New Zealand, where it was, I believe, destroyed in an accident. A guy rebuilt it, and it now is continuing to be raced. Well, not raced, but shown off and enjoyed by the public. So one of the cars, like I said, we're running today is the 33A, but we'll get back to that shortly. We've got Bruce McLaren Motor Racing. Bruce McLaren, of course, the creator of McLaren Formula One. He was really good at building Can-Am sports cars. Can-Am was basically pretty much almost ruined by the McLaren dominance. If you were tired of Lewis winning with Mercedes and then Max winning with Red Bull, you probably wouldn't have enjoyed Can-Am as much because Bruce McLaren's team was always winning. But he built an F1 car. The first one was powered by a Sierra V8, then a modified Ford Indy V8, and then he got a 2.5-liter BRM sports car engine to run in the M4B. Oh no, the M4B is, I believe, a BRM offshoot, a BRM V8 offshoot. He would get a BRM V12 turn and miss the M5A later on in the season, almost winning the Canadian Grand Prix. McLaren's first one would come a year later at Spa, using the Ford Cosworth DFV. Honda. Alright, so in the original vanilla Grand Prix Legends, you don't get Honda, you get Murasema, because Honda would not give their rights up to their name to Papyrus and Sierra. Thanks to the modding community, you get Honda. They ran a couple different cars in 1967. Honda won the last 1.5 liter Grand Prix in 1965 with their RA272, drove by Richard Ginter. It was a V12, air-cooled V12, that ran well in the high altitude of Mexico City, and it won the last Grand Prix of the 1.5 liter era. Honda probably could have continued the momentum going, but they took so long to build the car. Ginter didn't appear in the car again until the Italian Grand Prix in September 1966, this RA273, and it wasn't as successful as it could be. The RA273 was used throughout 1967. It was used up until the German or Canadian Grand Prix. I can't remember if Honda actually appeared at the Canadian Grand Prix. But this car, the RA300, would go on to race at Monza in September and win. It only ever led one lap of its entire Grand Prix career, and it led the one that mattered for John Surtees to win the Grand Prix. So that's what we're looking at with Honda. The cars are fun to drive. They're a bit heavy. The RA300 definitely is a bit heavy because it is based on a Lola Indy car. It's actually nicknamed the Honda Lola because you combine the two names. And it is a very, very heavy car to drive. I mean, it is 1,500 pounds. And let's take a look at what that Lotus 33 is, 1105. So, yeah, that's I mean, Bruce McLaren's M4B is 1,105 pounds itself, technically. This is 1,500 pounds. I mean, the Formula 2 cars are ballasted up to 1,105. I mean, the Brabham weighs a little more than that, but not too bad. Oh, and the other thing about the Brabham is the Repco engine in the Brabham. This is the last fact, and then we will get to the main event of why we're all here to see what we're doing. The Brabham engine is called a Repco, and that stands for Replacement Parts Company. It's an Australian company that produces car parts. They also were very active in local racing down under, in helping drivers, including Alan Jones's father Stan, try to win the Australian Drivers' Championship or the Gold Star. It could never won a Gold Star title. And they also never won a Tasman title. I think they only ever took one Tasman Series race in the 6 years the Tasman Series ran, and that was Jack Brabham at Longford in 1967. But the engine was based on a shelved Oldsmobile engine that GM wasn't going to use, and Brabham bought it for 11 pounds, which before devaluation in 1971 probably would have been somewhere close to maybe $100 possibly, maybe a little less, but it was like $100 engine bought off GM. It's basically an LS when you think about it. It's an LS type engine that was used in an F1 car to win 2 world championships. I mean, God bless the Australians. If they see a problem, they'll fix it in the wildest way possible. I mean, I absolutely can't complain that that worked because it was so reliable. It was actually somewhat light, too. But yeah, so those are all the cars that we, see in Grand Prix Legends 67 Extra Mod, the first part. Now, we're going on to the main event. So, training. This is really important. Grand Prix Legends, of course, is one of the toughest simulation games produced. It was definitely the toughest when it came out in 1998. Training is a great way to learn the circuit, so I'm going to walk you through how I learn a circuit, how I, practice and get this right. So we're going to start with Kailami. Kailami is a magic circuit in Johannesburg, South Africa, and hosted Grand Prix racing from 1967 to 1985. The circuit was changed in 1988 as development was starting to close in on the circuit, a tale as old as time. And instead of closing the circuit and turning it into an AI data center, an Amazon warehouse, or a junkyard or a parking lot for cash for clunkers, instead they just modified it slightly. The circuit wasn't the same, and people complain about it. But hey, guess what? At least we still have part of the circuit, and technically, I think it is a fantastic circuit, but it is not the same as the magic place that is Kailami. Kailami is my home in Zulu. That's what it means. Kailami, my home in Zulu. It is 5,000 feet above sea level, which, if you understand just what that means, it means if you have a V8 engine or a V6 engine, congratulations, you're making a lot less power than you would be if you were at somewhere like, I don't know, Zandvoort or Silverstone. This basically favored 12-cylinder turbocharged cars. Of the 19 Grand Prix that were held at Kailami between 1967 and 1985, 9 of them were won by 12-cylinder turbocharged cars, which, yes, DFD-powered cars also took more wins, but it was a lot tougher for them to get around Kailami than it would have been for any other car, because it was almost as if they put restrictor plates on them. So let's talk about the layout. You have this big long straight heading down to Crowthorne Corner, which is named for a local hotel. You come out of the corner, you come down this short, almost too short, but yet still too long straight for you to ever really get comfortable. To head into Barbecue Bend, that name is self-explanatory. Then you come down this, once again, too short for real power, but still too long enough to let you get into trouble. Head into the Juxke Sweep, which is named for a nearby river, the Juxke River, and is also the name of a traditional Afrikaner game played that's similar to horseshoes. Then you have a medium-length straight down to Sunset Bend, so named because coming through it, if the sun was in just the right spot, it would be in the driver's eyes. You'd get down to Clubhouse Bend, named for the clubhouse on the site. Then, again, another too short yet too long straight here into the S's, the most tricky part of the circuit. Another short straight, not long enough for you to really get into trouble, to bring you into Leeuwkop Bend. Leeuwkop is an Afrikaner word which means lion's head. It's named for a nearby hill. Kop is what a lot of hills are referred to in South Africa. Kop means head. If you're a fan of Liverpool FC, I'm not. I'm a Manchester United fan. Sorry, guys. one of the stadium stands is called the Culp because of victory in the Boer War at the turn of the 19th into the 20th century. Leo Culp was the name of a nearby hill, almost a mountain, and there was a prison there called Leo Culp Prison. If you get this corner right, it's going to be perfect and give you enough speed to get you down this more than medium length straight through the kink, self-explanatory. You don't really need to lift if you're on the total inside of the kink, but if you're to the middle or to the outside, you're probably going to want to lift, which will hurt your speed down this long straight. It's 2.5 miles, it's 9 turns. Kailami, my home in Zulu, is my home in Grand Prix Legends. So let's get started. Alright, so I'm going to walk you through how I learn a circuit, or also how I learn a car. GP Labs on YouTube does a great video about how he learns a circuit, and that kind of inspired me to do this little intro to Grand Prix Legends through this. First things first, we're going to do a car setup check. So we're looking at the Formulaone car, the Lotus 48. This is set for long practice session. So practice sessions in novice mode are 15 minutes. You get about 6 laps in. I at least try to get about 6 laps in. The race is about 8 laps, so I usually set it to 10 laps of gas, but today we're going to run 6 laps. I'm probably going to do about 5 in the 48 and show you how I do this. I'm going to take you through gently and show you what I do. So here we go. Alright. Now I'm going to click on this. Alright, so I'm going to put the brake on because that is an actual downhill. Then, if you look at the screen above, I'm going to turn off a couple things here. Okay, here we go. So I turned off the player relative on, that was F6. Then I'm going to turn off the leader relative. We don't have cars competing up against. That's our timing and sectors, so you can see what we're looking at. And then that's our track position. Now I usually use the track position to see how far the cars behind the cars, or how far ahead the cars are, for practicing and racing. So, we're going down this long straight, and first thing I'd like to do when I'm going up the circuit is I feel sighting. And the sighting line for me is nice and soft. I'm just looking for sights. So this Firestone billboard, when I can start to read that, that's what I'm planning on starting. This patch of discoloration on the racing line, when I use that, tell me to start clicking up my thing to your speed. When I see that TV tower, I'm going to start to brake a little harder for sunset. When I get to Clubhouse, that sign on the interior corner there, that's where I'm going to start to pick up the power again. Then I'm going to come down to the S's, brake slightly, kind of put the throttle through. I usually like to let the car step out a little bit. I usually slide the car from the corner, and then at layout where that shell sign is, that's where I start to brake. I get the car right there. When I see that child on the inside of the corner, that's when I pick up the throttle forward here. Now, coming down to the pit, I'm going to throw it in the pit lane and get one car to get into others. We're going to get a 3 lap of time on. Alright, so our second lap of time on. You'll see we come down the straight. When I get to that point on the inside, that's when I'm going to start braking from there. I'm going to let the car slide out, keep a little more power in, take off steer out. When I get down here and hit the Firestone sign, I'm going to slap the car. When I get to this discoloration, I'm going to bend the whip slightly off for space speed. Then when I get down here, the sun clubhouse, I'm going to brake, sit the port sign, put the power on, the car slide through. Now yes, this is the trickiest part of the lap. Front a little off the brakes line on the side, let the car step out a little bit, the second one, lift off slightly from the shell slide, feed a little more power, then really get off the gas when I see the pedal on the side there, and power on down to the pink. Once again, want to tuck it over the entry line, and come across the line from 129.25. Now we can definitely go faster. I'll say no matter. Coming down here, we're going to brake slightly. Slide the car in. Get down the barbecue, see the fire's outside. An earlier turn in, as the cars slide out a little bit, at this duration, lift off a little bit. And go down to this corner at sunset, lift off slightly, feed in the power a little more. The car travel all the way outside, the grass, but now we're down, feed it in. See the port sign, the car go a little bit wider there, down into the S's, tuck it in, car slide, and the car slide a little like skis, shell sign, lift slightly, pedal on, now push as hard as we can down the kink. Now I don't play around a lot with card setup. You can definitely find card setups on all these cards. You can play around with what's best. I usually just go by what's on the ride. So we have literally picked up almost, about a second. And we're actually an ideal background, not one. We could almost match the background. We're probably not going to, because this is a 1600cc one. This was a particular row of reptile. But we might just be able to. Slide it a little wider, don't slide through there. And now we're home. That happens. Just be patient. And if some of you are probably thinking, hey, why are you doing this? I don't want to hit the car. I'm just sitting. No, I'm not. And that's not what sundaydriver does. Once again, the casual book is simracing and run whatever method you feel best. Run whatever setup is what feels best. I have a couple different setups. I run for a possibly qualifying lap. I run, that you're comfortable with during the race. If you make your car fast over one single lap, that's not really impressive when you're running an 8-lap race. You're going to be battling it the rest of the way. Now, I did a little bit of a late break in the 8 laps thing. I protocol that I did the first time. That's almost 300 to the second. But let's see what happens here. I find having a comfortable distance to be better than a car that's after a lap that feels terrible the rest of the way. This is not going to be a fast lap, it's not going to be a good lap. It's got to be a consistent lap. And that's really the point of doing this. Build a consistent lap where you don't want to let around here as quickly as possible. You're going to have to go 2 over the limit if you have one. Just have a lap ready in your back pocket. Put your car somewhere on the grid that's starting 13th is better than starting 20th. have to go for pole, but I like to go for pole. Alright, we did a 1:28:31. It's actually saying if we go do the ideal time, we'll actually come to the back row. So, Aiden's braking there, that's what's going to happen. Yeah. Alright. So that's the Formula 2 Lotus 448. Our best time is a 1:28:31 in the Formula 2 car. That's pretty good. Now we're going to move to a different car. We're going to move to that 2-liter Lotus 33. So let's see, where is that? That's here. Alright. Two gallons for 5 laps, that would be good. If you run your car too low, so you put in 3 laps of gas, you do 3 laps, you think it can go on to a 4th, by the end of your 3rd lap, your car's going to be sucking in air through its fuel pump, and it's not going to be fast. You are going to run out of gas at some point, but that sucking through the fuel pump is going to hurt your lap time. You don't want to do that. So here we go. We're going to do this with the 33. This is perfect. Sounds good. This is what this looks like. Has a little bit, because it looks more aggressive. The tires are about the same. I think it's too fine and soft type is not on the back. You know, probably something that is has now, they're for probably going to be subtle. Alright, we're going to touch the car here. Now the 33 feels a little bit more balanced than the 48. The 48 is twitchy. It was a very twitchy car in Formula 2 in 1967. 33 by this point was to almost perfection. It didn't do much to it. So 1:28:31 to peak. I'll probably set my better time. In my test run yesterday, I said about a similar time. The cars are doing 160 miles an hour. Now, if you get it well, slipstream, it will go faster. But it's almost like the old cars at the peak, like a second and a half behind the car. Really horsepower, but with no wind, your car will go flat. I've definitely put 100 to get on the floor somehow. And yeah. Alright. Hold on. Yes, this is now the points here are a little bit different, but not too different. And we're a little wide there. That's okay. Run right up to the inside here. Definitely gonna want to have to do that. 129 almost flat to start with. Alright, we're coming down the hill. 260 miles an hour. I don't want to speed it great. Because something I did have one that corner and I probably should have done a little bit of a better job. So this lap's going to get scrubbed. So we're going to make it tonight because I want to also remember how to eat that very fun. There we go. And I'm still missing anything. It's okay, the car wants to understeer a bit. It's almost a little bit nicer head to have that kind of car. So we're going to want to have oversteer when you have wings on the car, but now here's what it is. Okay. Alright, here we go. 160. Okay, let's break it down. Okay, I tucked it in too deep. Alright, so let's try this again. Come to real quick. Back. Now I've been running the F2 car for a while recently. So that's also why I have a little bit of rustiness running the 33. But that's okay. We're going to get this figured out. So this is going to be a pretty long episode, but I think it's important, at least for this first episode, 2 hours. Maybe like that. Talking about Grand Prix Legends, so really this is the, hey, if you're interested in Grand Prix Legends, this is what I think you should get. Alright, great. 72 miles an hour coming out of it. Not super fast, but we got it there. Alright, we're going to want to touch the car in with a few. Ease the car out. Now, I add a little bit of distance every lap. Because I got the car kind of smoothed out. Okay. The inside is getting close to the curve on the inside after it's on. There's a fire sense on it. Barbecue. Carbon on. And you're down to sunset. And a little over 100 miles. Settled perfectly. And sometimes it's not perfect. But that's okay. It happens. And let's go around again. That's what testing is all about. Testing the setup, but you're also testing the environment track. You want to be really good. Now I'm probably, I don't know, 200 laps I've had on these since preparing for these videos. It does good. I just, there's something relaxing about doing this. I kind of get more of the. The difference is I don't talk during my races. I'm actually very silent person when I'm driving a Formula 1 car wherever it is, as I've found. So this is actually my opinion discussing how I do run faster. Not that it's opinion regarding, all things. I'm just trying to explain how I do what I do. Alright, this coming up will be our training I will be running a novice race. One, because doing this for as long as I've been doing it, I am going to wear out. But, saying I think you also like running around race. So, I'm going to run a novice and show you what that's like. I've been running to get a feel for that. I used to run that when I was a kid, just going have accidents. I watched the cars break apart. I didn't want that fast. But I've been running novice to, get my hands. You got a feel for, gaming like this. And I've won a few. But I've actually improved myself. Now, there's a reason why I said the good portion that you should link your AI to your player. Now, there is a way to make the card that you're competing against slower. And that's by changing the card speed. But you have to use it at least. And that is playing after a while. So, and you also, it's trial and error. Like, I've won by 35 seconds at Monza, when in 1967 it was like 1/100th of a second between the leading cars when they came across the line. So it's all trial and error. You have to figure it out perfectly. It's never quite right. So if you link your AI to your car set and to your player, it's a lot more fun. You don't have to play around with equations and try and figure everything out. It's all set. I don't win races as easily as I was when I was, playing around with the equations. But it's a lot more fun. I'm enjoying myself a little bit more doing this. So I have it set to intermediate long because I was playing intermediate long racing. I am going to run a novice race, 7 laps, so you can see what we're doing. And I am going to use 5 laps of gas in practice. We have 15 minutes. And I probably could have done the whole turn on the circuit part in the 15-minute practice. But when I see names on the board, I go a little bit faster. I go a little bit more tense. And I don't think I'm going to turn to the top. Now, what I would actually like to do is for these long plays, and we will be starting with time. I will be running the circuits in frame so you can see the circuit, you can figure this works out, and you get a feel for what we're doing. Like they do for the Formulaone element. It's the whole time. Saturday qualifying on the broadcast, and you see what the drivers are at the fastest speed of the weekend. So here we go. On the middle of real fire. Now the novice cars are slow, so Jack Robin wants 1.7. I said about 1.9. Here's your that time. It does go good. Now I use a somewhat odd setup for controller. I use a lot Xbox style button. My A button is my accelerator. My right trigger is my brake. My left trigger is my clutch. Now I use an automatic gearbox. But most days I found starts. So I the clutch I right enough my right pump is my gear down. My left pump is up. If I ever and I steer with the left back pump. So I'm going to get a toe from knocking the 3 meter cube down the rock. I'm going to gain one. So I said about the same time I said in that thing. I was doing about 107. And I missed the bridge. Okay. Again, I didn't fall for the good. I usually miss the first corner I really haven't since I was about high school. But I have provisional code that's particularly started. I'm on my third lap and 5 laps of gas. I've got a couple, I've got one more full lap and then recall the car. Oh, they're also good for the south. Stops in that field, even though they produce hot but it would keep you healthy you get that. And the tires could have been changed because they wanted to like single workouts or triple workouts, some couple workouts. They were held on by 6 wheel bars. And when they had it. Like, have them have to be removed and take all day and do the race. In the 1967 Grand Park, the greatest driver of all time had a puncture. That problem pointed out he pivoted in, had them change where he was at, and at Monza, that is, after the park, he made the lap up, asked the leader to make a lap back, came back around, asked the mechanic to leave, because what is false contact and simplifying out of process. He put in a little tube that's fuel that won't be Park actually covered 64 laps instead of 64. And he lost the race on the final corner in his first because he ran out of it. Mechanics challenge for what it was called. And it was a thing that compounded out whatever was and then you mechanically add one more pound. Marion Ready lost in the 1978 for the 1978 South both were driving for Lotus, and Reddy's mechanic didn't do the mechanic count. Peterson's mechanic did. And after that, he really so big, he told contact they were not allowed to do the mechanic count. That the driver, the mechanic, was not contact. The Luke's philosophy in this era was if you had a 3-mile formulaone race and you come off the line first at 300 miles, the suspension rate that was okay to the stop. Alright, we are under the lap line. We're coming up to yes, left. So, what I like to do on these weekends, on one of these races here, especially in the ones where I got like an hour of practice, like the longer interviews, or even shorter practices, I will go out, set a bonfire, from the day. Somewhere on the grid. Usually my first lap is get me on the grid somewhere. My second lap is usually my back to try to get home. My third lap is if I screw up on the second lap. But then we come into the pits. I'm already a second ahead of Bravo. I had pole. So, set pole, or set a good enough spot. And go in, first setup, and we have a sun lap race, so we're going to have to run 8 laps. And then go back out, and test the car to feel the difference between. And there is a noticeable difference if you have to put like 18 laps worth of gas. Now, 8 laps worth of gas. This doesn't actually down here. But in 18 or 24 laps, you can definitely feel the difference. I definitely will practice it to make sure you have and trust me, 24 laps around time on you're going to do an hour practice and you can accelerate time if you want. Trust me, I really try to use practice as much as possible to get a feel for the track, the car, being around other cars, play them to figure it out. I can either be a fancy truck, drive off, or I could drive like they drove in the 1960s as a gentleman and comfortable doing it. So I tried to drive like they did in the 1960s. If I hit somebody, they would actually die. So, So, this is not going to be a fan class. Again, just kind of get into the it's all good. The car, and now, even though I have an hour of practice in the morning races, want to have your setup clean. Like, you want to have that food for what you want. You don't want to have to for 30 minutes to go. You're trying to figure it out. Because if you're wrong, and they care, even though that players will be 20 steps, one way up here they should, higher pressure, higher pressure. All you might to either have to reset the car or go back to the settle, do that because it's really fast. There's like great story about Taylor car up for the 2030 with, you know, like a small farm, something else, and like a spring, and his dad went out and he goes really fast, his dad crashed, and he goes, I'll see you in 20 minutes. And Earnhardt's car was set up with a big bar with a small shot. And sure enough, 20 minutes later, in the race, Victor is getting to this place. So, make the car that I still like to guess I went to and I still have a master one half to get it to the perfect. But I definitely consider a car up to do 7 laps and feel as consistent as it should. Alright, we have 30 seconds left. I'm not doing time here, but I'm getting a feel for what I want. Brake lines, length, medium length, front, car, I got Dave Charlton on my field. Dave Charlton is a no, that's Eddie Kazan. Dave Charlton is based on that. Really good. Charlie Otis and they covered all game rides. Otis probably said that they called over to give up the seat time. And it was just different. You didn't have a Otis technically they were just tired. With the 72, because it's not a good car. Except when they were also kind of like a frontline car. Yeah, that was not like a good deal for Otis. Or for Dave Charlton in that case. Slow down as we're going to hold rating because I've only entered Rob Walker, Cooper Maserati. Got the car set up we want. Got the speed. We're going to pause for a second and I'm going to show you the grid. Alright. So we have myself on pole by almost a second from Brabham. Denny Holman's on Love. John Surtees and Pedro Rodriguez. I don't know who's in 6th or 7th because I have the capture thing in front of that. But I know Bob Anderson and Dan Gurney are 9th and 10th. Jackie Stewart in the BRM is 11th. That's actually somewhat surprising because once again that's a really heavy car. Sam Tingle in his little Brabham is more than a second off of Stewart. He's 5 seconds off of me. Mike Spence is 6 seconds off of me, which is almost now like 107% at this point. Jim Clark is probably 7th or 8th here. Joe Bonnier in the orange Cooper Maserati is 13th. That car weighs a ton, by the way. It's about as heavy as the VRM, thanks to its Maserati V12. Luki Botha, who for many years nobody had a photograph of for the Formula One record book, is in 16th. He ran in this one Formula One World Championship Grand Prix, went to his next race in the South African Series, skidded off the road, hit a spectator, and retired after that, and never raced again. Piers Courage, heir to the Courage Brewery, is 15th. Joe Sifford in the Rob Walker Cooper Maserati is 17th. My teammate Graham Hill in the Lotus BRM 43 is 18th. And Jochen Rindt did not set the time because his car broke in early practice. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes they can get back out, but not with a 15-minute practice. So here we go. All right. Let's go with plug in. Plug in. I'm going to lose position. I mean, that's just what happens. I want to jump the start, sometimes when I'm on that one right on the space, which means this call for 1 minute. That's all. Now, if I remember correctly, our actually close during those 60 seconds. And first 43 was number C, and I won't get into the break yet. They went to some final I thought 21,000 or 41,500 races with 5 meter. Now, my same. I will never agree. Actually, if I play this, very braking hard into the climax execution really did not do the end there. Now I'm showing that through. Where Isaac and Matt are just standing, looking out at this speaking of stupid, but that was his fault. Alright, let's do this. Having progress now. Yeah, I know my way around time. I was 46 times, 5 minutes ago, and what's that? Well, actually, I was closing. I think I stopped at one point. I lost like 20 seconds. And then I was on my way back. So that's what I'm going to do. Now, part has something I get with this. Because notice is quite on turning back. Oh! 30 got around the ball. That's right. Alright. See, the biggest problem is with that 3-liter PRM engine, or 2, whatever you want. This is kind of like the Yumi Pickup Line versus the SUV like a hot initial stage. Yeah, the RX-7 is faster on the straight from like 6 down to 4, and actually through this PRM battle thing. So I'm probably not going to get anywhere close to Pedro Rodriguez's score, but I am going to try to get Pedro and Hart. And I'm probably a good chance to get control of 2-liter or 1.5-liter Climax problem. You'll hear me throw numbers around quite a bit. I will never actually say when we start, like, sound over. So, cubic inches in the long term is better than precedent. Like a 4.7 sound forward, like 7 but I don't know, 183 what's no problem? Alright, so down on the tail column, stick it down to the side, and stop. Definitely enough room on the apex. Kind of slid it in there perfectly and got it. So now coming up to Grand Prix Legends on the side, obviously eliminated. Mike Spence of the 96, he never really got a fair shake. He was part 58 in 1965, fairly well, but when Arendelle came back, Tom Chapman had promised him to drive, and Spence was so close to retirement, Spence not racing, but Arendelle was in actually won the national championship about Grand Prix Legends, a nice farewell project. Unfortunately, Spence was killed on the second testing for the 500 Alright, we got no time. We are probably going to do it, so I was like, slide, wait to get close to this. But I don't think it's close enough. 2 seconds left. What we're going to do only have, because we're going to I totally get that. Still got to come in 7. That's okay. Alright, here we go. Alright. So, 7. Not great, not terrible. Thinking Pedro Rodriguez might go back to I'm not going to do the cooldown. No problem. So one thing we probably do have to work on is starts, but that's okay. Leon did retire. I'm just going to fast forward. We'll export these. C7S. CA. Sweet Africa. And then this is what you get when a race is completed in Grand Prix Legends. A little report. Apparently, I had the fastest lap of the Grand Prix, 127.99. That's almost as fast as the lap record around here, so that's pretty good. Yeah, I mean, he held off teammate Denny Holm by, 0.3 of a second. And Clark was only 10 seconds behind at the end, and I was only about 13 seconds behind Bravo, man. That's not too bad. So anyway, that's a look at Grand Prix Legends. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Jack Coburn. You have been watching Sunday Driver on the alsatianproductions YouTube channel. Have a wonderful rest of your Sunday, a wonderful week, and I'll see you next week for Sunday Driver. Please do like and subscribe, hit that bell to be notified about further Alsatian Productions videos. We definitely have other types of games. We're not just a racing games channel. But Sunday Driver is definitely the day that will be for driving. So thank you so much for accompanying me on this journey. And have a wonderful weekend and a wonderful week. Bye. This has been a presentation of Alsatian Productions. Vroom!